In the previous video, we installed Python 3.6 onto this computer. Now it's time to have a quick look at idle. Now, when developing software in any programming language, an integrated development environment, or IDE, makes life a lot easier for developers. So it allows you to enter, compile and run your programs from within that program without having to leave that program or editor to actually run and execute your program. So you can avoid using the command line for a lot of programming. Now, Python provides a very simple IDE called idle, which we installed with Python in the previous video. Now, the name idle is a homage to Eric Idle, one of the members of the comedy group Monty Python. Now, idle interfaces directly with the Python interpreter. Now, for a number of reasons that will become apparent as we progress through the course, we suggest using IntelliJ IDEA or PyCharm instead of idle. And in fact, in the next video, we're going to show you how to go about installing that. But if you prefer to stick with idle for any reason, or if you have to access idle, or you just really want to find out a little bit about it, it can sometimes be very useful. So in this video, we're going to show you how to use the basics of idle. Now we're going to assume that you've installed it as shown in the last video. So we want to start, in this case, because we're on Windows, we want to start idle from the Windows Start menu. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to type in idle. So you may need to navigate to the programs file and select idle, which will be in the Python area where Python was installed. But in my case, you saw it pop up there automatically. So idle is the one we want. Python 3.6, I'm going to press enter. And that loads up this little shell, which I'm just going to put in the middle of the screen. What I'm going to do is just size that up so it's a little bit easier to see. And you can check that it's the right version by checking the message that appears. You can see here Python 3.6.2, and that of course was the version of Python that we installed in the previous video. Alright, so once idle is running, anything you type will be passed to the Python interpreter and the results displayed on the screen. Now, ordinarily in a program, you need to use the print statement to display a result, and you'll learn a lot more about that in later videos. But you don't actually need to do that in the idle shell. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to type 2 plus 4, and press enter. And you can see I immediately got the answer 6 showing on the screen there. So what happened here was I typed that command in, the expression 2 plus 4 was passed on to Python, and Python evaluated that and come back with the answer, in this case 6. Alright, so what we're going to do is just type in some code here. Now, don't worry too much about exactly what this code means. You don't need to understand it at this stage of the course. The purpose of this video is just to show you how idle works. In later videos, you're going to learn in detail the syntax of Python. Because basically we're demonstrating Python, not explaining the Python language at this stage. Now, in the course examples, you'll often have to enter code blocks, which are blocks of code spanning several lines. Now, idle knows when you're typing such a block and won't immediately execute anything until you've finished the block. You'll know it's expecting more text because the chevrons, the 3 greater than signs, which you'll see shortly, well, they won't reappear until you've finished. But let's actually type in the code and you'll see what I mean here. So I'm going to start typing for space I in range, noting the spaces I'm putting there, and I'm typing everything in lowercase. Then I want a set of parentheses. Then within the parentheses, I want to type the number 10. And then at the end of that, I want to type a colon. Now the colon at the end of the first line is very important, and so is the indentation of the second line, which you'll see when I press enter here. So I'm going to press enter. And again, notice, as I mentioned, I think something's changed. Now in the past, when I typed in 2 plus 4, I got the answer 6. But here we haven't seen those little chevrons, the 3 greater than signs appear, and that's because Python is expecting something else. Now notice how it indented automatically for us. So we're going to type in now print parentheses I. I didn't do anything else, and I'm going to press enter one more time. So we've now finished our simple little program, and I'm going to press backspace to delete the indent. Now this tells idle that we've finished the block, and when I go ahead and press enter now, it's going to execute the code. And you can see that we got the results 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now again, don't worry too much about understanding the code. You don't need to understand the code at this stage. The point is you can see that idle has some basic capabilities to run Python code. Now, this is all very useful for checking simple instructions, but editing what you've typed isn't very intuitive. So let's just say we wanted to change the number 10 that you can see up here. We wanted to change that to the number 11. What we can do is move the cursor up to the previous line and press enter, and idle will bring a copy of it down again, ready for modification and execution. So I'm going to move my cursor and go up to that line, and I'm going to press enter. And you can see it automatically copied that code down to the bottom. And now I can move the cursor up one more line, change that to 11. I can delete out the 0 and make it a 1. Move the cursor down to the print line, press enter, and press backspace, and then press enter. This time it executes, and you can see that we've got one additional number showing down the bottom. Alright, so that's one way of executing code, and it can be useful if you just want to check out a bit of code and see if it works. However, you'll often want to save programs in a separate file and run them from there. So what we're going to do now is go to the File menu, click on and choose New File, and you can see when we do that, I get a little editor here, a little simple little text editor. And I'm going to type in a program here, and then we're going to try running it. So I'm going to type in print, and in parentheses, then double quotes, hello world. So I can run that. I can either come over here and select the run menu and run it that way. Alternatively, I can press F5, which will do the same thing. So I pressed F5, and it comes up and says here that do you want to save the program before we run it? So let's go ahead and do that. We'll click on save. And I'm going to save it on my desktop. We'll call it hello world. Press enter. And you can see what happened was after I saved it, it went back to the other Python shell window and executed the code, and it now gives us the name of the file that it used when the Python file was run. Now again, we'd recommend that you use IntelliJ IDEA instead, and that's because IDLE's fairly basic and doesn't really provide any hints, code checking, or all the other features of a full IDE like IntelliJ does. But if you want to stick with IDLE though for some reason, this brief introduction will have got you started. Now, installing IntelliJ IDEA and configuring it will be covered in the next video. So here's a few reasons why you should consider using it rather than IDLE. Firstly, IntelliJ IDEA has got code checking as you type. So IntelliJ checks your code as you type it in and flags errors with a marker in the right margin. And it also suggests improvements in both the style of your code and the content. And this is incredibly useful, especially when starting out with a new language. Now, auto-completion works across the various Python libraries to provide rapid selection of the methods and functions and hints on the syntax, whereas IDLE only copes with core functionality. It's called auto-indenting. It also allows editing of XML and text files so that the same tool can be used to examine data. It's got excellent refactoring tools. It's got a Python debugger. It's got support for Django and also Google App Engine projects. And the other cool thing is it also supports many languages in addition to Python, Java, Scala, Perl, Groovy, and many frameworks. So the point is you really only need to learn one IDE for all development. And also keep in mind that Google's Android Studio for Android development, well, that's basically IntelliJ IDEA under the hood. Now, although we're going to be using IntelliJ IDEA in this course, you can use your favourite IDE instead if you prefer. So if you're already using something like Eclipse or PyCharm or one of the many other Python IDEs, then by all means go ahead and carry on using them. Alright, what I want to do now is finish by running a short program that we've created just to demonstrate some of the power of the Python language. Now this program is going to collect exchange rate data from the internet, then produce a graph showing 3 currencies for the last 12 months. Now, this complete program is less than 100 lines of code, and I think that's pretty impressive. Now, generally what we strongly recommend is that you type in the code while watching the videos in this course. I really can't stress that enough. Typing in code rather than just watching me type it really does help you learn faster and consolidate your learning to help you understand what you're doing. So that really is important, and without going into a lot of education theory, you retain about 80% of the things you do compared to about 30% of things that you see. Now, if that doesn't persuade you, I'll add what we learnt by typing in code. We didn't have the internet back then, so back when myself and Jean Paul were starting out as programmers, we didn't actually have the internet back then, so we actually copied the code from magazines and books. Now, the act of typing it in makes you focus on each word that you're typing, and correcting the typing errors afterwards really does help you to learn what's going on. And I'd also recommend that you watch each video again after you've typed the code so that you can focus on the explanation of what it's doing. But with that said, this next bit's an exception to that, and that's because this code that I'm about to show you is quite complex. So we've produced this program to show you the power of Python, and there's a lot of things in the code that just won't make sense to you at the moment at this point in the course. And that's because this program that I'm going to show you uses functions, generators, external modules, and things like lists and tuples. Now, probably all of that doesn't make sense, but by the time you finish this course, you'll understand what all those things are, and more importantly, how to use them in your own programs. In fact, you'll actually understand a lot more than that. For now though, relax and let's just run this program to get a feel for what you can do with Python. So what we've done is we've made this program that we're going to be using freely available for download on the internet because it's such a small program. So you need to open a browser. Let's go ahead and do that. Then you need to go to the website Learn Programming Academy. So it's learnprogramming.academy/ and then we want to type in pydownload.html, and you can see the link there on the screen. If I press enter, we get this simple little file pop up, and it's got an option here, right click and save this file to your computer. So what we've done is we've put this Python code on our website, and we're now going to download that. So I'm going to come over here to this link, I'm going to right click that link, click on save target as, and I'm going to save this onto my desktop. So I'm just going to click on desktop, and you can see the name of the file there, exchange_chart, and you can also notice it says save as type Python file. So I'm going to click on save. And it was a very small file. You can see that it's already finished down the bottom. So I'm going to close down the browser now. And I'm back at idle now. So from the file menu, what we can do now is click on file, select open. We want to go to our desktop. And we're going to click on Exchange Chart. You can also see the other Hello World program that we created earlier in this video. And now I'm going to select open. Now you can see that's the code that has been downloaded and that we've now opened in idle. And if you're not familiar with Python, I'm sure that probably looks very complicated, but as I said, you're going to understand all of this and what it's doing as you work through the course. Alright, so at this point, let's actually run this program to see what it does. So I'm going to press the F5 key, remembering that I could also come up here to the run menu and click on run module if I chose to instead. So I'm going to click on F5 or press F5. So what's actually happening now is that in real time, the Python program is actually downloading the current exchange rates for 3 currencies, and it's then produced a chart, as you can see there, for the last 12 months for those currencies. So depending on when you run this, you'll find that the dates will be the last 12 months. You can see right up here to August 2017, and that's the current month. And it's basically showing the Australian dollars, the Great Britain pound, and the euro against the US dollar. And again, the program displays the data for the last 12 months, so you'll get different months following along the x-axis. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty impressive for only 95 lines of code when you consider it includes the code to download the relevant rates. It actually charts the results for us automatically, and you saw that it was pretty fast to boot. So I'll just close that down again. So again, I'm not going to explain how it works at the moment because it uses a lot of Python features. Everything it does do will be explained in the course, so it'll all make sense as you work through these videos. Alright, so that's the brief tour of idle. In the next video, what we're going to do is install and configure another IDE, IntelliJ IDEA. And we'll also talk about PyCharm instead, which looks exactly the same as IDEA, but only supports Python programming. As I said though, if you're already using an IDE that supports Python, then you can continue to use that instead for this course. Your screens will obviously look different to the videos, but the code itself will be exactly the same. Alright, we'll finish the video here and I'll see you in the next one.